L'Abbaye des Morts, or The Abbey of the Dead in English, is an indie game for the ZX Spectrum, which was then ported to several systems, including the MegaDrive. The game was created by the same developer behind Maldita Castilla, which is a modern release inspired by Capcom's Ghouls and Ghosts. I'll admit I've had some trouble finding a timeline for L'Abbaye des Morts, but best I can tell, it originally began as a PC indie game, developed to more or less simulate a ZX Spectrum, before eventually receiving a port for that very same 8-bit computer and a few other systems, including the Commodore 64, Intellivision, and now the Sega MegaDrive. What's cool here is that the MegaDrive game actually gives you all 7 different versions to play in just one cartridge. Meaning, you can play the 16-bit version of L'Abbaye des Morts, or you can use a menu to switch up the sound and graphics and play the ZX Spectrum, Commodore 64, Amstrad PCW, MSX, CGA, and Gameboy versions. I have honestly never seen any Sega Genesis game do this before. But before we delve deeper into this, the game comes in a pretty awesome collector's edition. I should point out that I own the collector's edition of the game by Play on Retro. I know the game is available on other stores, but as I understand it, this is as close as you're going to get to an official release. I should also point out that their website doesn't actually list the game. Instead, if you want to get L'Abbaye des Morts, you'll have to email them and either ask for the regular or collector's edition. I'm just lucky they were more than happy to sell me the collector's edition at a heavily discounted price because I was going to review it. Anyway, the game comes in an embossed cardboard box. I have to admit, the cardboard feels a tad too flimsy for my taste, but the embossed bits do feel rather nice to the touch. Releasing the latch and opening it reveals a poster which, I don't know, not a big fan of the art on this one. The design seems overly digital to my taste. A sealed letter, as in an actual letter sealed with hot wax which was then stamped on. I am at a loss for words. This is one of the best things I've ever seen in a collector's edition. I'm sorry, but this is just amazing, because you can feel something heavy inside, and now I'm left with a dilemma if I should open it and break the awesome seal, or just leave it unopened for all eternity. And the paper feels rather nice too. It feels old and rough to the touch, as an old letter should feel. You'd think I'd hate the uncertainty of whether or not I should actually open the letter. But I actually don't. It really helps making your collector's edition feel that much more unique. In the end, I chose to take a pair of scissors and carefully cut the letter from the top, so as to preserve the seal to reveal a map of the abbey inside. And I really like this map. It looks as if it's been used and partially burned, which I like. But I also like how the enemies on the map look like a mix of pixelated graphics and old-time drawings. I'm actually loving this. I also got this little MegaDrive keychain, but I'm actually pretty certain this was a neat little extra the publisher sent me and is not actually part of the collector's edition. And that's nice of them. And finally, we have the game itself. Now, I'm going to assume that if you get the regular edition, you're only going to get what's inside this box. But I'd still email Play on Retro to be sure. Once again, I'm not a big fan of the box art. Like the poster itself, the art feels overly digital. It kinda reminds me of those ugly mid-90s Sega Saturn box covers for titles like Story of Thor 2 or Panzer Dragoon. On the back of the box, you have a few screenshots of the various versions and a short description of the game in Spanish and English. Though I should point out, there are a few spelling mistakes here, like escaping instead of escaping. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm not a fan of the cover. But the cool thing is that the game actually has a reversible cover. So if you're like me and don't like the standard art, you can just switch it out for this one. Which I'm still not a fan of, but I do like it a bit more than the alternative. Inside the box, we find a postcard with a thank you note written by hand, and it actually specifies my first name. And I gotta say, I really like they took the time to write a personalized thank you note. It really makes the collector's edition feel that much more unique. We also have the manual in some very high quality paper. Not only is it in color, but it also feels like it's trying to simulate a leather-bound book. It tells you a bit of the backstory on the game and how to play it. But you will find the occasional English mistake here and there, so be warned. Still, this is an awesome manual, and my biggest gripe with it isn't the occasional spelling mistake, but rather how it kind of spoils who the final enemy in the game is. I think that's something that should have been kept hidden. And no, I won't tell you what it is. And finally, just to seal the deal, we have the cartridge, which is neatly tucked away in a Des Morts themed pouch. Man, just look at this! Play on Retro really went all out with their edition of the game. As for the cartridge itself, it looks identical to a Pico Interactive cartridge in both plastic quality and design, meaning the space for the sticker is a bit longer than an official cartridge. It even has the same spelling mistake on the back as a regular Pico cartridge. However, unlike a Pico cartridge, Des Morts has these circular screws, meaning I have no way of opening it and checking out the PCB itself. That was a lot of stuff. Sure, I may not like everything about it, but even for a collector's edition, this is impressive stuff. And in my opinion, is actually better than many collector's edition for modern AAA games. So yeah, I'm definitely a fan of this packaging. With the exception of the poster and cover art, everything fit the game's theme perfectly. Booting up the game, you're quickly brought to the main menu, where you can pick which of the 7 versions of the game you want to play. You're then told you're a Cathar monk escaping persecution by the Templars. And so the game begins. The first few screens are just you escaping from the Templars, until you enter the titular Abbey of the Dead. Once you're in, this is where the true game begins. In essence, Des Morts plays a lot like most European 8-bit computer platform games of the time, meaning the game doesn't scroll. Instead, you reach the end of the screen and a new one is loaded. You also have no way of defending yourself, so you'll have to dodge any and all enemies you find. Finally, you're free to travel back and forth between screens, solving puzzles as you do so. Basically, if you've ever played Jet Set Willy or the Dizzy series, you generally know what to expect here. Your objective is to collect the 12 crosses scattered across the Abbey and use them to defeat the evil within. However, most sections of the Abbey are closed off, so you'll have to ring bells, turn levers, and solve light puzzles to open them. The thing is, the Abbey itself is pretty small. In fact, I'd say as a whole, the game has about 20 or 30 screens to explore, most of which are pretty easy to get by. Some require a bit of pattern memorization, but overall, I'd say even the hardest ones are just average in difficulty, especially when compared to horrors like, say, the Banyan Tree in Jet Set Willy. Now, it's kind of hard to show game footage for this review, because I kind of don't want to give away how to solve the puzzles, as I feel that's part of the fun with these games. Moreover, the puzzles themselves are pretty easy to figure out, especially considering there are several hints scattered about. The only exception is, in my opinion, the dragon puzzle. Yes, there's a hint for it, but I found it so vague and generic that if I hadn't stumbled into the solution by sheer luck, I probably would have never figured it out. And honestly, that's kind of it. The truth is, there isn't much more to the game itself. Once I memorized where all 12 crosses were and which lever did what, I was able to finish the game in about 20 minutes. I will say, the horror themes are really well done for such a basic game. Exploring the Abbey is cool, but I especially like the eerie vibes it gives you with the secret garden or the tree with the hanging corpses. It made for a really nice Halloween-themed retro game. I mean, I don't really celebrate Halloween, but it ended up being a fitting title for the time frame when I was playing it. Then again, from a technical standpoint, neither the game or graphics will win any awards. But the immersion factor is well played here, and there's even a screen that serves no purpose other than to remind you of how hopeless the situation is for your character. They even named the screen Prayer of Hope, and I like that they took the time to do this. There aren't that many colors, and the soundtrack often employs some very harsh sounding Sega Genesis noises. But what's here is... it's okay, I guess. Really, its biggest distinguishing feature is the ability to switch between game systems. So, let's talk a bit about that. As previously said, you have 7 systems to choose from. For the most part, this review focused on the MegaDrive version, but there are some interesting changes with the other versions. For one thing, this is not emulation. Rather, it's the same engine running with the colors, sprites, and sounds altered so as to simulate the system you chose. And to be fair, for the most part, you're given a pretty close approximation. I can't really confirm, but I'm going to assume the colors are not 100% exact though. I mean, the MegaDrive only has 512 colors in its memory, and I find it hard to believe it has the exact same colors as all these other systems. But, like I said, you do get a close approximation. Another example is that you don't get any color bleeding in the ZX Spectrum simulation. Whereas the real ZX Spectrum version of the game, the color of your character would bleed into the scenery. More than just changing the colors though, the gameplay and level design will also slightly shift. Enemies and platform placement might change slightly, as well as your walking speed or that of your foes. So for example, in this area, you can simply jump onto these platforms here and ring the bell. But in the Game Boy version, you have to go to the next screen and hop from platform to platform until you reach the bells. At the gate, some versions will have 2 sets of flying enemies, while others just 1. The game also does a good job at playing with your mind, as some jumps that are completely possible in one version become impossible in another one, changing your optimal path for completing La Baie des Morts. One odd thing I noticed is that the Game Boy and a few other simulations have parallax scrolling for the clouds, which is missing from the MegaDrive one. Instead, the MegaDrive has flying leaves in a few areas, but I'm pretty sure the console could have handled both. I also noticed that changing the console did not change the music, with the exception of the Commodore 64. Basically, if you're playing the Genesis version, the game will sound like this. But if you're playing the Commodore 64 simulation, it sounds like this. Again, I can't really testify as to whether or not it perfectly mimics a Commodore 64, but it sounds like a good approximation. But no other system has this, meaning if you're playing the Game Boy, Amstrad, ZX Spectrum or CGA versions, you'll always get the Genesis music. Which is odd because the ZX Spectrum 128K sound chip was actually really similar to the Master System one, so the potential was clearly there. In fact, games like Shadow of the Beast have the exact same music for both the ZX Spectrum and Master System. So this feels like a missed opportunity. I did like how the Commodore 64 version also reduces the resolution quite a bit, though at times I was left wondering if they didn't go a bit too far into an Atari 2600 look. And that's it for the game. Overall, it didn't take me long to complete the game, and your enjoyment will mostly depend on whether or not you like games like Jet Set Willy and the fantastic Dizzy series. I seriously love the idea of changing between consoles and computers on the same cartridge. But while the concept is pretty novel, I did feel that at times it wasn't as developed as it could have been. The Commodore 64 simulation was great, but the ZX Spectrum simulation could have used a bit more work if you ask me. If the game interests you, I recommend you check out Play on Retro's website and order either the regular or collector's edition for yourself and give it a try. If nothing else, it's worth it just to say you played a bit of Game Boy on your MegaDrive. Hey everyone, thank you for watching Stika's Retro Corner. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe and share this video. All that fun social media stuff. And if you want to support the channel, check out my Patreon, where you can find all kinds of awesome rewards. Anyway, I hope you have a great day. Bye!